Welcome back. In light of intense competition and ever-changing market condition, the long-term success for tech startups doesn't come easily. Let's now find out what are needed for tech companies to survive for the long run.
Zhu Zihui graduated from Dalian University of Technology and has been fascinated with planes since he was a kid. He has finally created his own drone, but he still can't afford renting his own office. Not long ago, he rented a workplace at Beijing Maker Space.
I
guess you could say that the workplace at the incubator is pretty cheap. It's 1,200 RMB per month. It's not cheap for an incubator, but it has a lot of advantages. It has a lot of equipment that other incubators don't have, and the people here are entrepreneurs that arrange events 3 or 4 times a week, like my startup event just now, and courses and sharing, or people getting together to make things.
In order to add to their income, Beijing Maker Space and Cheku Coffee rent out some of their desks. The customers don't come for the work environment, but for the extra services. This event, called the Half Hour at Lunch, has been a staple of Cheku since its very beginning. During the event, people can introduce their ideas and demands and search for help and partners. There are several types of startup platforms. Some are free and some aren't. Their goal isn't turning a profit, but to build popularity and expand their influence. This is also part of Beijing Maker Space's new concept.
We just launched Chaihuo 3.0. What does that mean? It means that both in our daily operations and the running of the entire incubator, we've realized that there are a lot of makers and entrepreneurs that are facing the same serious problems. Namely, what to do after they've created something. After you have your product, will you be well received by the public? Will you be able to sell it on the market? And so on. So in this environment, Beijing Maker Space is actually very well suited to help incubate a company's external affairs. So our slogan for Chaihuo 3.0 is connecting the industry and the people. We want to take the things that our makers create and put them in production, so they can be taken in by the traditional industries.
In 2013, Beijing Maker Space helped a company making virtual reality headsets get crowdfunding from the USA. Joanna thinks this is only the beginning. Now, the company has more than 300 members in Beijing and has spaces in Shenzhen, Shanghai, and Tianjin. On the first workday of 2015, Li Keqiang, the premier of China's State Council, visited Chaihuo's Shenzhen branch, meeting young entrepreneurs face-to-face and even signing up as an honorary member. He stated that makers show the entrepreneurship and innovation among the people, and such creativity will serve as a lasting engine of China's economic growth in the future.
So, Professor Jia, expanding influence and building up user base is basically what every single tech startup is after now, even at a cost of burning money. But at some point, they would have to turn a profit. But in order to turn a profit, they have to make sure what they're making is in high demand of the public. What about marketing research? Are they going to do that in order to make sure that what they're making is popular?
Right, that's a great question, Tracy, because I think one of the challenges or dilemmas facing a lot of startup companies is they come up with the idea for a product that they think think customers want.
Right.
And then they spend months, sometimes years, trying to perfect that product without showing it to their prospective customers. But when they finally release the product to the open space, to the customers, that's when they find out this is actually not something that attracts customers. This is not what customers had expected.
Right.
This is a very risky strategy, right? So
because
nowadays,
there are a lot of upfront costs, right?
That's
that goes
right.
into making something.
Right. You think this is something that customers want, but it's actually not, right?
Right.
So now a new startup approach is called the lean startup. So basically, you come up with a prototype product, and you basically push it out to the market, get early customer feedback and validation, right? And then based on these early feedbacks, you continuously improve your products. So by the time the final product is released and widely distributed to the market, it's actually something, it's something that the customer wanted. So basically, engaging customers early on in the R&D process is very important.
It's very important, certainly.
Right.
We talked about now the big environment is very, very pleasant for these tech startups,
Sure.
given the fact that Premier Li Keqiang is pushing this Internet Plus initiative.
Right.
But they're still facing a lot of challenges. Identify some of the major obstacles for these companies.
Well, I think the first one I can think of is increased competition, because now the entry barrier for startup your own company is very low. So pretty much, I see a lot more startup companies nowadays established by my friends, my colleagues, etc. But with more and more startup companies, they're still competing for the same supply of resources.
Right.
So for example, they're competing for capital, they're competing for human talents. I hear some of my friends actually complain about how difficult it is nowadays to find the IT staff, find the right UI designer, find the same CTO.
The same thing going on in Silicon Valley a few years ago, where these tech companies are actually colluding and trying to fight for talents.
That's right. So the competition is basically, this is an extra cost, for all the startup companies. So they have to try harder and grow faster in order to secure a strong foothold in the market.
So these tech cafes like Cheku are becoming extremely popular among tech startups, almost necessary now.
Right.
But how can these type of cafes expand in the future?
Right, that's a great question, Tracy. I think going forward, these cafes will become part of a bigger sort of national entrepreneurship ecosystem. If you look at the development phases of these type of cafes, well, the generation 1.0, so to speak, is that's when they started. They basically provide all these physical locations for entrepreneurs, right? So they partition the cafe into different conference rooms and meeting rooms for these entrepreneurs to come and work in teams on their projects. And they also provide, access to computers, access to fax machines, and etc. All these basic facilities.
Support.
Exactly. And moving on to the second stage, which is generation 2.0, this is where these cafes start to provide more value-added services. Right? So we know that if you start a company, you not only require office space, but you need a lot more. Right? So you need capital, you need human talent, and you need mentor and potential venture capitalists. So basically, they can provide, say, resident venture capitalists who are there, and if you have a problem, and they can walk you through, different issues. And going forward, which is generation 3.0, I think those cafes will become a critical component of a bigger ecosystem.
Right.
And actually what I've heard is one of those cafes is thinking about a project. Basically, it's going to build up a resident community, right? So basically, people who are interested in becoming entrepreneurs, they can all live there. Because the problem now is a lot of people live really far away from the center of Beijing, right? And they have to commute 2 hours every day to Cheku Cafe or 3W Cafe. So what they're thinking about instead is building all these houses or apartments so they can use the first floor as office workstations.
I see. So it's a office plus hotel.
Hotel, exactly, right? And then you can live, on the second floor, third floor, right? Which is actually quite interesting.
Saves a lot of time, energy, and money.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Professor Jia. Thank you for all your insight.
Thank you.
Well, folks, Beijing's Zhongguancun area is dubbed the Chinese Silicon Valley, where high-tech companies and international investment make business headlines every single day. But in between of these multi-billion-dollar deals signed by China's tech giants are the millions of tech incubators and entrepreneurs that are in charge of defining China's future in technology. Now, before I go, just a reminder that if you have an interesting business case to tell, make sure to email us at newmoney@cctv.com. And thanks you so much for joining us today on New Money. We'll see you again at the same time next week.